Alright, hi students. So this is our third and final video on the revision for modeling, covering chapter 7, chapter 8 and chapter 9. So let's start, shall we? Chapter 7 is a lot about how do you compose your pictures, and kind of question I'm gonna ask is basically cameras and exposure. What controls exposure? The three main aspects that control camera's exposure. What are the terms that relate to it? Like f-stops is actually your aperture, shutter speed, and ISO is actually your film speed. Shutter speed is how fast you're closing the shutter. All right. So f-stops is basically the aperture size, and how that actually affects other things like depth of field and so on. So focus on exposure. What are the three main aspects of it, and what it controls as well? What affects it in return? Alright, so that's that. It's quite long until here actually. But yeah, that's basically what you need to focus on. Exposure. And moving on, when it comes to your composition and staging, what you need to focus on is how can you get good composition. So there's some guidelines on what you can use. Like you need to understand how it is used as well. Like the rule of thirds. How do you use it? The intersection where these lines meet as you split the pictures into three is where our the most interesting part of the picture should be as well. So as horizon, the horizon should, as a general rule, sit on the line of rule of thirds and so on. And also, where it crosses, where the lines crosses is where your main subject should be. Or, if you see a picture and it has good negative space, understand what negative space is as well. How it's different from, your positive space, which is the main subject or the foreground objects in your scene. Right, so understand that. Also, we have things like graphic weight. How graphic weight works, like when you see something that's contrasted with the background, this has a lot of graphic weight as compared to the rest of the things in the picture. Graphic weight is a lot of things as well, so just go through this list. So I'm not asking you to really memorize all this, but understand how each one of them are used. How to use rule of thirds, what is positive negative space, how do you use it, what is graphic weight, how lines can add to the composition, and also the last one, which is tangency, which is this. What are tangencies? Where do you see tangencies happening? Here's some examples where you can kind of figure out, like you can actually form tangencies when two objects actually overlap each other, and that's going to confuse the viewer and so forth, so on. Alright, moving on to chapter 8, which is lighting. Lighting is quite a long chapter, but what you need to focus on is basically lighting. In a 3D program, there's different types of light. What are the different types of lights and how they're different from one to the next? Like spotlights, they have like cone angles and penumbra angle, and that actually controls the softness of the light. So understand how you can get soft edge effects with your light. What actually controls those things, right? So focus on that as well. What are directional lights? What kind of light does it mimic? Basically, it mimics the sunlight, and so forth, so on. Other things that you need to focus on is this is a really long chapter. Let me just, here it is. Occlusion and also ambient occlusion. Understand what they are, how it works. Just focus on this, yeah? Ambient occlusion, as well as this one here, another term called subsurface scattering. Where do you see it happening? In particular, it happens in organic flesh, like leaves as well as hands, and also stuff that are not really organic, like not really living tissue, like for instance candle wax and so on. So understand what subsurface scattering is as well. Alright, moving on to chapter 9 is rendering. So what do you need to focus on? A lot of it here in rendering is basically it's a discussion of this new technique of rendering, which is called the physically based rendering systems, like your Arnold's for instance. So understand what physically based rendering is, as well as the shaders that come with it. Yep, so it comes with its own set of physically based shaders. How is it useful in production? Not so much how it works, but how that can be used in production, how it helps the director and as well as the artist in working much more efficiently, and how is it different from what came before. Before we had physically based shaders, we had all the legacy shaders like your blend and your fongs, and why is it hard to work with them as compared to the new physically based shaders. So please do go through that and understand what they are. Don't go blank whenever I ask you about PBR or physically based rendering systems. Yeah. Alright, so that's basically this video, and I'm gonna end it now. I'll probably in one special video I'll just briefly talk about the format of the final exam. Alright, see you there.